live in HD from WVUE TV New Orleans. This is Fox 8 News at 6.
Time now, 6:41. Take a look. This is what it's going to look like come this weekend. 17,000 runners and walkers will fill the streets from downtown all the way to the lake as part of the second annual Rock and Roll Mardi Gras Marathon. The race stretches 26.2 miles, of course, for the full marathon, 13.1 for the half. So if you plan on spending all that time on your feet, it's important leading up to that to get some preparation in. And Dr. Lance Estrada, orthopedic surgeon from Touro, is here this morning. Thanks so much for getting up. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So what do folks need to be doing now to get prepped up for this weekend if they're going to run either one of these races?
At this point, 2 days before the race, you just want to make sure that you're not really deviating a lot from your training schedule at this point. The day before the race, you want to make sure you do a light run, nothing too long or heavy.
What's a light run for a marathoner?
A light run for a marathoner at this point in their training typically is 5 miles or less. You also want to make sure you're not really deviating heavily from your normal diet. The day before, particularly the night before, I frequently am asked what is a good meal to eat. Something that's largely high in carbohydrates and vegetables and somewhat low in protein is usually a good meal to have.
And have you ever heard of anybody truly running out of carbs? Does that really happen?
They don't really run out of carbohydrates, but I mean, people do feel like they hit the wall, so to speak, and that does have to do with how much glucose is kind of stored in their muscles or their legs. And so, I mean, but some of that often is really related to their hydration when they feel like they're kind of running out of energy or steam during a race.
So I guess hydration is critical on that marathon route.
Very important, and the route planners for marathons typically take that into account for where they place the drink stations. And so it's generally recommended to try to get a drink and to really drink that drink at each and every station to try to stay hydrated, although our conditions for running this Sunday are going to be pretty ideal for marathon running.
So even if you don't feel like you're thirsty, make yourself go ahead and drink.
You definitely should.
What about stretching? I'm an amateur runner, by no means a marathoner, and I always wonder, you know, you hear different schools of thought on stretching before, being too cold to stretch and injuring yourself. What's the best strategy?
Although I think the science is still kind of out on the exact best way to stretch, I think most folks agree that stretching before and even a little bit of a warm-up run, a quarter to a half a mile before a race, is generally recommended. Your stretching should, when you do stretch, and a lot of times people ask, well, what's the correct way to stretch? You want to stretch your muscles evenly, both opposing muscles, so your quadriceps and your hamstrings, for instance. You want to spend about 30 seconds stretching on each side, and you want to do it to where you're discomfort but not pain. And I think another important time to stretch is actually after the race, because that's when muscles really want to cramp up and get tighter.
Vitamins and supplements. We see all the commercials for energy, for endurance. What's your take on those?
Well, that whole supplement industry is not under the purview of the FDA, and so that means that they can make any claim they want and they don't have to substantiate it. Most of those claims I don't think are substantiated by the scientific literature, and I think just a healthy, balanced meal along with plenty of hydration is what's going to really get you through a race of this length.
So just go with good basic nutrition versus expensive supplements.
Yes.
Cramping up. If you find yourself partially through, or shoot, even if you're on a 2-mile run and you start cramping up, is there any way to alleviate that or work through that?
Well, yes. In a race setting, what's recommended is that you kind of pull aside and stretch out that cramp, because trying to run through the cramp generally doesn't work. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Often looking at why are you cramping is a bigger question, I think, to ask, and frequently again that kind of goes back to hydration and electrolyte supplementation. And so if you're really down on your sodium or potassium levels and your fluid levels, that'll often lead to cramping. So again, it kind of goes back to making sure you're really not only pre-hydrated before the race, but you try to stay as hydrated as best you can during the race.
Dr. Lance Estrada from Touro, thanks so much for all your insight this morning, and I guess we'll see you out at the Crescent City Classic this year?
Yes,
All right.
I will be there. Thank you.
Start training now. Thanks for your time.